the Holocaust, a word that has become synonymous with the darkest chapter of human history, where millions of people died in the most horrific ways imaginable. We think of barbed wires, high walls, the gas chambers, and the silence of the camps. We think we know the face of this evil. The face that inflicted such horror onto innocent people. But before the cold, deadly machinery could operate, the Third Reich needed a different kind of machine. They needed a device that could sort, identify, and categorize millions of human beings with ruthless speed. To hunt down a specific minority in a nation of 60 million people required a level of data processing that no human bureaucracy had ever handled. Germany needed a machine that could filter chaos into order and citizens into targets. And in 1933, there was only one company at the time that could provide such logistics: the International Business Machines, or IBM. So, one has to ask, how did America's premier technology company forge an alliance with the Third Reich? What drove this partnership? And more importantly, was the price worth the trade?
Welcome to the Discovery Clock series.
To execute a plan of this magnitude, the Third Reich needed more than just an ideology. They needed real infrastructure. And they found it in a Berlin-based company known as DHMAG. While the name Deutsche Hohlrichtmaschinen sounded patriotically German, the company was anything but. It was a subsidiary that was 90% owned and micromanaged by International Business Machines, or IBM, New York. The technology the company peddled out was the Hollerith punch card system, a precursor to the modern computer that had originally been designed to count the US population. The concept was efficient. Every citizen was reduced to a paper card. Information about their gender, residence, profession, and religion was recorded by punching rectangular holes into specific columns. These cards were then fed into sorting machines where electrical brushes would pass over the paper. When a brush found a hole, it completed a circuit, allowing the machine to count, categorize, and cross-reference thousands of people in a matter of minutes. It was the first time in history that a government could process the secrets of its citizenry at an industrial speed. The Nazis did not have to seize this technology by force, as it was enthusiastically offered to them. The head of DHMAG, Willi Heidinger, was a reported Nazi supporter who understood exactly what the new regime required. He pitched the Hollerith system not merely as a tool for statistics, but as a weapon for racial purity, a way to mathematically analyze the population and filter out the undesirables. But Heidinger was merely the middleman. The true architect of this alliance operated from an office in Manhattan. Thomas J. Watson, IBM's president and founder, was a man who famously preached world peace through world trade, a philosophy that conveniently argued commerce should transcend boundaries, politics, and morality. In his eyes, the Third Reich was simply a client, a dangerous one, yes, but nevertheless a very profitable one. And as the Nazi orders for the IBM machines began to increase throughout the 1930s, Watson did not stop there. For instance, he personally visited Berlin and the Führer himself to ensure the relationship remained strong and stable. He viewed the 1933 census not as the prelude to a crime, but as a triumph of data processing, proof that his machines could efficiently organize a nation. He chose not to ask what Germany intended to do with that data, as it simply didn't matter to him. What mattered was that his company could continue doing business as usual. However, IBM's growth was driven by more than just mere demands for the machines themselves. In fact, it was being driven by a tight financial control on foreign currencies enforced by the Nazi regime. Many American corporations, including IBM, Ford, and General Motors, had already established themselves in Germany during the democratic period of the Weimar Republic. But when Hitler transformed that democracy into a dictatorship, he enacted strict currency embargoes. That meant that profits generated within the Third Reich could not be easily converted to dollars and sent back to the US. In theory, the profits made in Germany could not leave the country. However, faced with a mountain of cash they couldn't repatriate, IBM New York made a cold and calculative move. Instead of writing it off, they poured their blocked profits directly back into the German pre-war economy. The company began to fund the construction of a massive new factory in Berlin-Lichterfelde and expanded their facilities in Sindelfingen near Stuttgart. They even began to purchase rental properties and Reich bonds, effectively becoming landlords and creditors to the Nazi state, in spite of the international boycotts against the regime. And whilst the bulk of their wealth was being used to modernize Hitler's infrastructure, New York still found ways to circumvent the embargo. Through accounting stratagems, such as billing their own European subsidiaries, their German, Dutch, Polish and Bulgarian ones for royalties and fees, and later transferring them to IBM Geneva, they ensured that a stream of profit still flowed back to the United States. It was a perfect, self-sustaining loop. The more the Nazis expanded their control, the richer IBM became. This alliance would eventually reach its peak in 1937, when Thomas Watson received the Order of the German Eagle from Adolf Hitler, the highest honor a foreigner could receive from the regime. However, as the violence against the Jews began to increase and spill into the streets in 1938, Watson began to waver. Not because he had any remorse for what his company had provided, but because he feared for his own public image. He sought to distance himself and his company from the regime, even considering returning the medal. But he was dissuaded by the United States government itself. Indeed, Secretary of State Cordell Hull personally convinced Watson to maintain the relationship, arguing that an American presence in Berlin was a valuable diplomatic channel. Watson agreed, holding on to the medal and the contracts until the spring of 1940. But as the war intensified and the persecution shifted from expulsion to extermination, the role of IBM's technology took a darker turn. Their machines were no longer just counting citizens. They were in fact being installed inside the administration of the occupied territories and the concentration camps themselves. From Dachau to Buchenwald, and eventually to Auschwitz, the SS established what were known as Hollerith departments. And the foreign origin of this technology was not a secret to those operating it. Leon Kremieniecki, the last surviving Polish administrator involved in the rail transportation to Treblinka and Auschwitz, later testified that he knew the machines sitting on the desks of the Nazi rail authority could not be German, as all the maintenance labels were written in English. Furthermore, the machines did not bear the name or logo of IBM, but of Watson Business Machine, the name of IBM's Polish subsidiary. Watson had created several IBM subsidiaries named after himself, each one confined to one national territory. Watson Belge was the Belgian subsidiary. Watson Italiana served as the Italian company. In many places, the business names Watson and IBM were synonymous and inseparable, and this branding confirmed the dark reality of the business model. Unlike a truck or a rifle, which are sold once, IBM's machines were leased. This meant that the machines located inside the concentration camps remained the property of IBM. It meant that IBM's German subsidiary had to train the SS officers on how to use them. It meant that authorized repairmen had to enter the camps to service the machines, and that the company had to supply the millions of punch cards required to keep the system running. The evidence of this collaboration was quite literally punched into the paper. The company designed a custom code for the camp system, turning the victims' identities into data points. In column 3 and 4, they tracked the prisoner's identity. Hole 3 signified homosexual, hole 12 for gypsy, and hole 8 for Jew. But it is column 34 that remains the most chilling. This tracked the method of a prisoner's departure. Hole 3 signified death by natural causes. Hole 4 was execution, and hole 6 was special treatment, the bureaucratic euphemism for extermination by either hanging, gunshot, or the gas chambers. As the world spiraled into war, Thomas Watson made one final calculated move. In the spring of 1940, after the invasion of Poland had made his association with the Reich untenable, he finally returned Hitler's medal. But returning a piece of metal is not the same as severing a contract. The business of IBM's subsidiary, Dehomag, continued. The punch cards were still being supplied, the machines inside the camps were still being serviced, and in truth, Watson was a man who planned for every contingency. As early as 1935, when talk of war in Europe became pervasive, he had moved IBM's European headquarters from the vulnerability of Paris to the safety of Geneva. This shrewd move created a neutral base of operations. It allowed the company to use Swiss accounts and its IBM Geneva as a discrete conduit, bypassing Nazi currency laws and ensuring that the profits from their European subsidiaries could be repatriated back to New York. And when it became clear that Germany was losing the war, IBM acted with the same cold efficiency it had always practiced. In 1944, the company began recovering its valuable Hollerith machines from the occupied territories. This corporate disappearing act was so effective that for decades, Auschwitz historians were convinced that there were no machines at the camp processing the prisoners. In reality, the evidence had simply been removed from the crime scene before the investigators had arrived. After the war, as the world grappled with the scale of the horror, IBM was not put on trial. Instead, the corporation was treated as a victim of the conflict. The profits that had been held in Swiss accounts were collected. The recovered machines were refurbished and leased out to new European clients. The books were balanced and the war was over. Thomas J. Watson would continue to lead IBM until just before his death. Celebrated as a pioneering entrepreneur in the field of computing who had helped build the modern world. The company he created would go on to pioneer the digital age, its technology becoming the bedrock of our global society. The past was buried under layers of innovation, success, and secrecy. The Hollerith machine is now a relic of a bygone era, but the questions it raises have never been more urgent. IBM's collaboration proved that the true horror of the Holocaust was not just its hatred of a people, but its ruthless, automated efficiency against it. It was the first time in history that a genocide had been powered by information technology. We worry one day, to some extent, that algorithms and artificial intelligence could potentially pose a threat to us. However, the story of the IBM's punch card is a stark reminder that the ultimate danger is not the intelligence of the machine or its strength, but the moral indifference of the men who run them. It is the ultimate proof that the most dangerous weapons are not the ones that merely kill, but the ones that allow us to forget. We are killing human beings.